Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Man's World podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to save a marriage. For those of you who have been following us, we're going right down the timeline or the life cycle of a man and the things that you have to deal with. We talked about previous episodes about what to look for when you are getting married, what to consider. We talked about polygamy, taking on another wife, if you should, when you should, how you should do it. And now we're talking about if you're in a situation of there's marital discord or there's problems going on in the marriage, of what to deal with them and how to assess whether you should save the marriage and how you could go about saving the marriage. If there's any questions, you can type them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the show. If you don't want to be known about, or like you're asking a question, you can click the link that's in the chat to ask the question anonymously. And with that, we're going to jump right into it. So, Mubarak, what are some of the things that when someone comes to you and says, okay, I'm having XYZ problem with my wife or husband, um, what should I do? Or how do I make this marriage work? That's what they want to make it work. How do I make it work? What should I do?
So, for the man, I would say if we start with the man, we'll say that usually if a man is coming and he is saying, I am really thinking about either divorcing my wife, ending a relationship or whatever. If they're married, of course, the first thing is going to be that is going to have an effect. Probably is going to be the financial ramifications, especially depending on the length of the relationship, if there's children involved, and if the marriage was done legally, like through the courts, or a government marriage where you're legally husband and wife through the government. So if that's the case, then the financial ramifications, especially if you're a man with some, who has done well financially or is set up to do well financially,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to think about that. So of course, there's possible alimony, um, child support, which depending on the state how they are going to assess. They like in this state that I'm in, they assess your gross pay, not even after taxes. Like
Yep.
before taxes, whatever that number is, that's what they are going to extract based on the number of children and situation you have. So you have to really think about that. So you're seeking some happiness or satisfaction, is it worth the amount of financial hit that you're going to take?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a situation where you just think or you feel you can do better, pump the brakes, because maybe this is what you can get, but the risk of trying to go out there, get rid of your wife, divorce her, and then try to do better, it's going to come at the cost of possible alimony, possible child support, and things like that. So you really have to actually do the numbers. You have to look at it and say, if Fulana takes me to court for alimony and child support on the high end, what could I possibly be paying?
Right.
So if you're willing, if you're okay with possibly giving, having to hand over to her 45% or more of your uh, monthly earnings, plus who knows whatever pension and things like that, then go ahead and seek some happiness somewhere,
Yeah.
But
Right.
otherwise, it probably, as the statement says, it's cheaper to keep her. A lot of times it is, if
Yep.
you can keep her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's very important to consider this because a lot of guys don't consider this fact. And as far as like tangible results of when you're considering whether you should work on keeping the marriage or divorce, a lot of times you see men, they jump to divorce, right? They just jump to like, okay, I need to find something better. Um and this goes for men and women, that a lot of times you ignore what you actually have right in front of you, chasing something that you think is out there that's better, and not recognizing what position you actually are in your life, that you might not actually get something better out there and put yourself in a worse situation, especially for the men. We're talking about financially. If you have kids, if you're like Mubarak said, legally married, you really have to consider these factors. And Mubarak has hit it right on the money. Sometimes it's cheaper to keep her when you're talking about financial wise. But what about because we're Muslim. What about the spiritual aspect of it? Because a lot of time there's a lot of times when you go to get advice from different people, and they'll, depending on what their background is, they'll bring the spiritual side, the religious aspects of marriage and divorce. And I'll just say, from my perspective, when I was younger, I had a incorrect idea of like marriage and divorce in Islam, and where the point was like I was staying married no matter what, right? And divorce is bad. You hear the hadiths that out of all the halal things that are out there, Allah hates divorce the most. So there's a stigma, or there's a fear that comes along with divorce, and sometimes people may stay in a situation or try to save a situation because of the religious aspect of it, of just trying to please Allah. So what can you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, you can try to please Allah, but you either being um, unhappy doesn't automatically equal pleasing Allah, or
Right.
you staying in a marriage or keeping someone else in a marriage doesn't please Allah. Maybe if you think that the other person also may be better off not with you. Sometimes it is about fit. Some You might fit really really well with a different uh, type of woman, and she may fit better with a different type of man as possible. So it's really it's relationships are unique a lot of times, and when you deal with that type of personality, the personalities and those people and the other factors around them, to really assess whether it's a situation of y'all need to work this out. Because a lot of
Right.
times, a lot of marriages in when really it really is y'all actually need to work this out. This is not something that really is a deal breaker. Y'all really
Right.
shouldn't divorce actually. But if they don't have someone who they both can look to get for some advice or understanding from, and that's some stuff that we'll get on into a little bit later. But that's really where it boils down to. So sometimes the spiritual aspect is there's there's not a negative spiritual effect on a person if they get divorced for a reason that's necessary or justified, and
Right.
vice versa. There's not going to be there's not going to be some sort of increased spiritual gain because you stayed in a marriage that you should not have stayed in.
Yeah.
So and Allah knows best. But I mean, what would you say about the thing where if a person gets divorced, some things they don't consider of how difficult it can be with co-parenting, because I think that's something that you can really expound on, because it's something that people don't, I guess they don't think about until they're in it, and then it could possibly be the most difficult part of it.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to deal with, even in the best of situations, right? If you're thinking about getting divorced, and you assume that you and your ex are going to have the best co-parenting situation you could possibly think of, it's still difficult. As men, speaking from the man's perspective, we find comfort and gratitude and peace and enjoyment in certain things. Like, just you'll see a lot of men after the divorce, they have a hard time dealing with just not having a bunch of kids around them doing whatever they're doing, not even like interact. Just, I hear the kids in the other room. I hear them saying dad. I hear them like they they come home to a empty house and it's quiet, and it's traumatizing for them. So that's even before you get to like dealing with the other parent, raising them. So there's a lot we can get into with that, but you just have to know that, one, most situations are bad situations, right? Even the ones that are like, okay, that's actually a okay, good co-parent situation, both parents aren't happy in the situation. That's usually what happens, right? It's very difficult. You're not going to have the same involvement, control, influence, or whatever the different things that you are used to doing as a parent as you did before, right? And it's almost how I look at it is, every parent, even if you stay together and married, is every parent deals with a point in their life where it's like you have to let the bird fly out the nest, right? And you just have to, like, all right, they might crash, they might run into a branch, they might trip and fall and all these different things, and you want to be there to pick them up, help them and guide them, but you can't. right? And you just have to kind of like let it go. Well, when you're in a divorce and there's a co-parenting situation, no matter how old the kids are, you're actually forced to go through that experience, and not in this natural due course where like, oh, a kid gets married or they go off to college, where it's those natural transitions like, okay, they're taking that next step. No, you're forced to deal with it when that kid is like 8 years old, 9 years old, and you have to like, I have to let go. They're flying the coop, right? So just know that it's going to be different. Don't think, and you have to run the risk of, you don't know what your partner's gonna, how they're gonna act after the divorce. You may be thinking like, oh, this is the best decision for both of us, and they're gonna understand. You don't know if that ex is gonna be bitter, resentful, right? Even if that person is leaving you, actually, right? Even if you're like, I want to stay in the marriage, and they're like, no, I want a divorce. So you're like, all right, well, let's get a divorce. They believe it or not, they could be bitter and resentful for their idea, because we talked about this in previous episodes. But looking at it from the kid's perspective, some kids may take a side, and that might not be your side. They might turn against you. So there's all these different things that you have to consider if there's kids involved in a marriage when you're thinking about getting divorced. And if that's something that you prioritize and you value, then you want to make sure you include that when you're asking the question, is it worth saving? Is that relationship with my kids worth saving? You have to consider those things.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we looked at the like in trying to save the marriage. I know I jumped ahead a little bit. It was talking about divorce, but we're trying to save the marriage. That's for next week, anyway.
Yeah.
But in when we talk about, is it worth saving, like as far as the spiritual aspect, is that if this is a person who does not have a negative effect on your spirituality. For instance, if uh, a person has a husband who um, doesn't pray, or doesn't pray regularly, or doesn't wake up for Fajr, or has maybe some bad habits, and he's really not a net positive as far as spiritually. So a lot of times, and then I tell people, like, if you have friends where, if you're not encouraging them to do something, that is Islamic, or kind of advising them against doing something haram or something like that, they would be doing, like,
Right.
But if your spouse is someone who, if you have some weakness here or there, and you want to engage in something that's not good, they're just going to go along with it, or they're not going to be someone who's going to help you to be better spiritually, then I would say that is a scenario, a situation where you could say, if I'm not with this person, if I'm not with this person, then you can't look at it as a negative. Now, on the other side, if the person is seriously, they're a husband or wife, right? Who is, they are praying and they are fasting, and they're doing it as far as Islamically is concerned. They cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and you're not going to have an issue there as far as practicing Islam and being,
Mhm.
encouraged to do what's right and stay away from what's wrong. Then that is a situation where you could consider that to be a marriage worth saving.
Yeah.
So, as far as the spiritual benefits there, and after that would be the financial benefits, which kind of is what we talked about, where you could wind up taking a serious financial hit, from, if you do get a divorce. But also, you could be in a situation where a lot of things that you may not have considered that you may have to pay for, forget about the alimony and child support, but also transportation, moving the kids around a
Mhm.
lot. Maybe if you're in a different state, traveling from state to state, maybe. There's a lot of financial, things that go into that, for the man and the woman. So the woman,
Yeah.
probably the financial aspect is gonna hit home pretty hard. But um, and the other thing that you have to really consider, is, so whenever anybody gets divorced, a lot of times the people around, even from the kids to the in-laws, parents on both
Mhm.
sides, and it's almost, there's a point where they feel like they have to pick sides. It's been times where people who, I mean, I'm cool with, I never had an issue with them, nor have, there's been any issue with my ex-wife or anything. But I, I come across them face to face, like either they like help to move or do just random stuff, just random like friendly stuff or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's almost like this awkward thing where they're like, like there's no apologies needed. I mean, like, I'm still cool, and some of those relationships are still a little, they're still a little weird and a little awkward for some reason. I'm not awkward there. I guess some people just feel like, well, if we're still cool with them, then does that mean we can't be cool? Like, I'm cool either way, but that
Yeah.
that is something that comes into play where some people do say, hey, listen, if you're my friend, you can't be their
Yep.
friend, or if even with family members, it's like, you're gonna pick sides. Sometimes your relatives usually are going to. A lot of times this is built in where they're gonna be on your side, but not always. But so that's the thing. Sometimes I just say sometimes people they get a lot of help and assistance, and if okay, pick the kids up from here. Yeah, can you watch my kid here or there with the relatives and family members of your husband or wife?
Yep.
And now you know you're almost like they may not necessarily be so quick to help you, especially if they feel like maybe you're at fault for
Yeah.
breaking the situation up. So these are things that you have to consider when you're
Mhm.
thinking about when you're thinking about, is it worth saving? So these the social there are social benefits in is there social benefits in the marriage, from the children to the extended family to the friends and all that. And
Yep.
so if those things are positives, then you can move on to the next step as far as, is this worth saving?
Yeah. And after you get to that point of like, okay, say your answer is yes, this is worth saving. And I would say, especially if you're there, I don't know what age or what situation to put it as, but if when you're past that, I guess midpoint of marital timeline, more often than not, it's going to be worth saving, right? It's those times where you run into issues early, right? Like, okay, there's a lot of issues before you have kids, before you're like grounded in and have all these ties. That's when you should be asked that question early and often. Like, okay, am I going to keep going? Am I going to keep going? Right? Do I need to keep staying this train? But you get to the point where it's like, okay, I want to save this marriage. And then the next step is, well, what do I need to do to actually save this marriage? Right? What is it that I have to do? And I think like the first thing is one, and it kind of ties right back to what the part you're talking about is like the blame, right? Whose fault it is, right?
Mhm,
What is the problem in the marriage? We have to
mhm.
identify those issues, right? You have to identify them. And then that's the first step, identify what the problems are. And then once you
So like,
identify the problems, you can, because I'm pretty sure if you're the one asking the question, the problems are probably going to be with the other person. But just know that you're not innocent in the situation. There's going to be, most likely, there's going to be some things that if you do have the conversation, your spouse is going to be like, well, the reason I do XYZ is because you do ABC. And there's going to
mm,
be that back and forth, but you at least have to put these things on the table and identify what those problems are. And you have to be an adult about it. You have to be mature about it. You have to be able to take ownership over your actions, right? Um, and then once you have them on the table, then the next step is to like, okay, now how do I actually address them? And I guess one of the first questions we have is like, can you fix them? Right? Like
yeah.
for instance, if say a husband is like, I want to get his wife can't have kids, and he's like, I want to have kids. How do we fix this problem? Well, there could be a way to fix it. If the wife is like, I'm not getting in polygamy, no way, not so ever. Well, maybe there's not a way to fix the problem, you know?
Yeah. Or like if you look at the example, and so I would even ask you, like, what would you advise a brother? So if the problem is like we had the brother in the news where he his wife just did not want him to get a second wife. She was vehemently against it. She ran
Hmm.
off with the kids for over a year with him, and
Yep.
that's the issue where the marriage is on the rocks. And clearly the brother wanted to save the marriage. So if you were advising him in that situation where he's saying, I want to save the marriage, this is the issue. She does not want me to take another wife at all.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you advise him in that?
Well, so if his issue is that, and that boils down to, I want a second wife, and she won't let me. So me advising him is going to be one thing. Well, start that issue, I believe, starts with you, right? And the
Are you
stuff that
capable?
you're going to actually have to work on as a man and as a husband to right, because you're actually basically telling me my wife is commanding me and I have to obey. Right. That's pretty much what it's fallen down to. So that's the first step. You have to work on yourself as a husband and be able to like where your power is in your relationship. And we get down to the nitty gritty of like how he can gain more power in the relationship, right? How he can, educate his wife, get her closer to like these sort of things so that whatever her issues are with polygamy, he can kind of address those. But at the same time, the main issue with him would be trying to gain the power in the relationship that he should have as being the husband, as being the leader in the relationship. And now it would take, we get into the details of like, what do you do with this and that, XYZ. But that's how you advise it. Because a lot of things, right, as when we're giving advice to men and women, we can only control ourselves, right? We can't say, oh yeah, you got to go convince your wife that she just has to accept it and she got to do this. No, what can you do with yourself that will hopefully cause a change in the other person? And then if you're doing everything you're supposed to do, that's supposed to, get some kind of change or reaction out of that person, then you're on the right track. If it's not working, then you maybe need to step back. Like, listen, I'm trying everything. It's still not working. Then you may need to reassess. Say, hey, you know what? Maybe if polygamy is a very important thing to you and you find yourself like maybe you're going to go sin or, those types of things, then maybe you need to, it's not worth it to actually save it, and then you go back to square one.
So when we ask the question, are you capable of what is needed to save it? If what's needed to save the marriage from the man's perspective is that he just doesn't need to take another wife, and that
True.
then
Yep.
she'll be fine. I mean, you've heard some people will say their wife will be perfectly fine as long as you don't take another wife. She's great otherwise. So
Mm-hmm.
I think if that's the case, where if he does not get a second wife, everything else as far as he's concerned with her is perfectly fine, great.
Yep.
Then I would flip it back. If that's the case, I'd say, hey, are you capable? Are you capable of just having one wife? If the answer is yes, or he'll try, then what is it that you think your wife can do to help you? She may have
Yep.
gained 100 pounds. She could have lost her libido. She could just be busy all the time. It could be something where, and in almost every relationship, and you can take it to the bank, most of the time, there's something on both sides where it usually will fix the problem. Now, sometimes it's something that's just can't be fixed, but a lot of times, if both people, work towards helping the other person, you can fix it. So he may have an issue with, it's not really an issue, but he has a propensity to want to have a second wife, and she doesn't want to deal with that. So maybe he might say, "Yeah, I'm cool," but she really needs to, uh, you know, step her game up as far as maybe with her appearance or
Wear
her
a wig.
availability. Or, yeah, you may have to. Seriously, there's some things that you can do. So the thing is, it's like that, right? If it's a thing where the man is saying, okay, if she is capable of losing 100 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
and some people might chuckle at that, but there's some people that are 100 pounds overweight,
Yep.
and it's just as far as just raw attractiveness, you're not going to be able to beat the person
Yep.
who's you know 145 pounds instead of 255 pounds. It just
Yep.
unless a person just has some sort of you know attraction to that, which there's some people, and you just have to
Yep.
find that person. But so there's always something. So are you capable? So if we flip it on the other side and we ask, hey, listen, your husband says he doesn't want to get a second wife, but he just wants someone who's in shape and who's at least looks attractive, can put on a sundress, or some jeans and a blouse, and look good.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're just running around in muumuus all the, muumuus, the just the night count all the time or whatever, and
Yeah.
that's, he's like, and everybody else is, dazzling, and you used to be. So it's like, then we would have to ask the wife, hey, are you capable of what he's asking for? Are you
Yeah.
capable of, losing weight, getting in shape, being more available, being more agreeable, in the situations where he, kind of wants, some attention? Are you able to do these things? And if the answer is yes, then hey, you can move forward. If you're saying, listen, I, I'm 100 pounds overweight, and capable or not, I'm not going to do it. Well, then there's nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
This is an issue that's going to break it down. So the thing is, are you capable of what's being asked? Sometimes you're being asked to go out to go to work, and you're a person who, I want to stay home. I wanted to be a housewife. I wanted to stay inside, and he's making me go out, work, pay the bills, whatever. And I just wanted to, have a few kids and raise my kids, and take them to the park and these things. Now I'm putting my kids in daycare, and I'm ripping and running like him, for these things. So if you're not capable of doing the things that are asked, or those things really just don't resonate or fit with what you are about or what you want to do, then that's where you say, well, it can't be saved. But if you are capable, then you can move on to the next step.
Yeah, and it's very important for everybody listening that it's usually not the tip of the iceberg that you're going to be addressing, right? You want to drill down a little bit to find out like the root cause of what the actual issue is, right? So like if we're talking about divorce, or you talk about people say, I want a divorce because she won't let me get a second wife. Whatever that initial response is usually not actually the real reason, right? So when you drill back, like what Mark was doing, is asking those, like he's going through the process of asking a probing question to get back to the root, right? And when you find the different things that lead to the actual tip of the iceberg, you can actually kind of fix things, right? So just whenever there's an issue that pops up that's asking, like you're asking the question of like, how do I save this marriage? Think a little bit more, right? Ask some probing questions, think deeper about it, and usually you can find solutions when you actually drill down a little bit more. So is there anything specific to like with men? Like, is there any difference between men and women when they're trying to save a marriage that men should do as opposed to what women should do?
Yeah. So I think for men, if we talk about men and where the man is he's saying, I want to save this marriage. And for the men, this is what you have to do, because everybody has had those, long drawn out conversations about the relationship and how to make it better and how to build it and all those things. I think ladies enjoy those conversations. I think men probably like they have them, but it is a thing where you're going to have them regularly. And I think the thing is, if you're having them regularly and you wind up having the same conversation, the same discussion over and over again, and like going back and forth about, you said this and I said that, and not understanding each other. So once you have one of those, and then you feel like we're having the same conversation, and we're not understanding each other. As a man, what you have to do is you have to stop. You have to get her to verbalize in her own words and agree to what the problem is and what the agreed upon solution is. Because men and women are going to, we just think differently on some things. But if what you're trying to explain and say, hey, this is the issue, this is what we need to work on, this is what I want from you or whatever, you need for her to verbalize that and say, I understand, this is what you want, this is what I'm going to do to fix it. And if that's satisfactory, then that needs to be documented, right? To where she has said, listen, I understand you want me to, go to work or stop working or lose weight or gain weight or whatever it might be. Take care of the kids, take the kids out of daycare, homeschool the kids, whatever it is. She verbalizes what the issue was and what the solution that you guys agreed upon, not just you dictating. This might go contrary to where people say, we're the man and you just make the rules. We've told you over and over again, sometimes that does not work. Just saying, I'm the man, I'm in charge, but I'm just going to just follow, for in a perfect world, yes, that will work. But to save a marriage, if you want to save it, this is one of the things that she'll need to do from her own mouth, articulating the issue and her articulating the things that you agreed upon, that she's agreeing to do, and document it. That way, it's a thing where it's more likely. Still, sometimes it's like you can have it documented, video recorded, written down, send in a letter, email, and then still has a breakdown. But that's a better way than you saying, "Hey, I said that you needed to do this X, Y, Z," and she's saying you didn't say nothing like that, and you're like, I mean, I said it very clear. So it has to come from the woman's side. I feel like that would make it better to where it's if you're wanting some change in the improvements that come from her side.
Yeah. And men, when you're having this conversation, you have to prepare yourself before you have the conversation. Don't have this conversation like right after you get from work, home from work, or you just came from the gym or whatever. Like when you have to prepare yourself for this conversation. And if you have any like tact or knowledge with dealing with having conversations with the opposite gender, you have to prepare yourself for those things. Like, for example, when you actually verbalize your issues with her, you have to be prepared that she's going to say she has the same exact issues with you. Just be prepared for it. Don't be like, that's bull. Like you recognize. No, just take it and just know this is part of how she's going to react. So when you say, okay, I don't like when you talk down to me or whatever it is that your issue is with her, be prepared. She can say, well, I don't like when you talk down to me. Okay, I understand that. I accept that. So when we come up with this agreement, I'm going to do, you already know it's not an issue with you. So it doesn't matter if you agree to something that you already don't do. You're good. But if she can say, okay, yeah, I accept that I do this to you, and I'm going to agree that I don't do this, or we're going to work on, you're getting progress. But there's a lot of different things we could talk about that with this, male and female interactions, husband and wife conversations. Just be prepared. And this goes for women too. Be prepared for natural human reactions to hearing stuff that humans don't want to hear from men and women. So like the woman, when you're saying, I don't have a problem with the XYZ, be prepared for your man to shut down a little bit. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah, you have to be prepared for these things. Okay. So you want to get progress in the conversation, and you want to get honesty, and you want to make it a safe place. And I really challenge women to make it a safe place to communicate, because as much as we have these communication barriers, from my experiences, it's a lot of times the women's that make it an unsafe place to have these conversations. And this is why you see why men don't actually even go in this arena, because they just don't want to deal with it. So try your best, ladies, to keep it a safe place.
Yeah, and like with the ladies, I mean, that's great advice for the men who are they're the initiator, or they're really trying to save the marriage. But for the women who are, from their perspective, in their efforts to try to save the marriage, what would you say is one of the things that they should look out for or implement?
Women, and this is I just kind of like bash women a little bit, but here's another bash on women again. But it's actually a positive quality that you had that you guys actually fall victim to. You guys are constantly trying to change men, right? You'll get a man and you'll see that he has all these issues, and you'll marry this man that that has all these issues, because you're like, I'm gonna change him, right? It's the old kiss the frog. It's a tale as old as time, right? I'm gonna kiss the frog and he's gonna become a prince. Just know, like, the one thing that when you're having these conversations with your husband, you have to know that it might not actually change, right? The man might men, we get set in our ways, and especially depending on the age of the man. Like if you're married to an older man, 40 plus, there's some things about them that they're actually not going to change, even if they want to. So you really have to assess, like, what are my issues with with my husband? And it kind of goes back to the first question. Even though we have this conversation, I want him to change. I want to put my issues on the table. You know, you have to accept that, he might only change a little bit. And the chances of him actually making major change is pretty low. So you have to really assess that first in your head when you're actually working at trying to save the marriage. And a lot of times it might fall into the category of maybe you need to find ways of how to actually cope with whatever the issues you have with your husband to a varying degree, right? We don't want people getting abused. We want people being transgressed upon and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, like the things that, like in general, the likelihood of him just making drastic changes, just like all of a sudden he just becomes like Mr. Perfect overnight, from your
Mm-hmm.
perspective, is it so extremely low unless you have such a high amount of leverage over him that he's actually scared. Like maybe you're gonna call the cops on him, or like he's gonna like lose a limb or something like that. Otherwise, it's very unlikely that he's gonna drastically change just because you want it, especially if y'all been together for a little while. So you really have to be okay with small, incremental improvements in those areas, unless it's an area like, okay, if he's not praying, right, then that needs
Yeah.
to, so maybe he's not, and so it could be a thing where he's not praying, but now he's praying his 5 salawat, but maybe he's not praying his sunnah, maybe he's not getting up for tahajjud, he's not doing extra. So you have to understand that if he was a person that was having some issues with praying, but you want him to be, Mr. Tahajjud man, or, doing a lot of extra, ibadah, and you want him to go and attend lectures in the masjid or whatever, this might be, something that is unrealistic for it to happen drastically overnight. But
Mm-hmm.
a minimum standard of him praying and doing certain things, should be there. If he has some addiction problems or something like that, then that's something a little different. You also, you should probably involve, people who deal with that, and not try to handle them on your own if it gets to a point where either he gets it fixed or the marriage is over. Then maybe you bring someone else in. But for the most part, a lot of different things that you may think he needs to change all of this. If you think that because you're saying it to him and you do this or he's going to be gone, it's not likely. So you have to kind of like not just accept it, but you have to look for whatever the positives are. You really do have to look and see, okay, what positive qualities does this man have that can be built on, or that are the reasons for why I'm even with him in the first place? If you can't identify any, get someone to help you to look at it, and maybe they can point it out. If you and your wali, your father, or someone trustworthy, not just a random girlfriend who probably ain't married, or someone who's wants you to be single with them or whatever, but someone who actually wants you guys to be together, to help you to point out, hey, listen, he's actually doing this right. Sometimes when we're so close, we don't realize how good a person is to us and for us until they're gone.
Yeah.
And then we're like, man, he was actually doing this and that. And man, usually I would depend on him for this, but now he's not there. So you have to try to identify those positives. And if you can't, don't just say, hey, there's nothing positive about him. Get someone to help you identify those positives. I guarantee you they are there, because you wouldn't be with him if they weren't.
Yeah. And I would say when you're having these conversations, because inevitably you're going to actually ignore what Mubarak just told you, and you're going to have a argument with your husband about how he's not changing the way you want him to change, or changing fast enough. And women you got to understand, men and women communicate different and understand words differently. And I'll tell you, women, never say never. Okay. And it's not the never say never as in like, don't ever say this is going to happen. No, never say never to your husband. Never say, you never take out the trash. You never bought me flowers. You never take me out to eat. I know, and Mubarak knows, that when women say that, they mean like, you haven't done it enough to my satisfaction. I know you have bought me flowers before, but a man's first reaction is going to be like, wait, I just bought her flowers last week. And what you did is just took away all the effort he did for whatever issue you guys talked about that he's actually been working very hard at on training. Let's take the Salat example, right? And he got up, he's been trying to get up for Fajr. He got up like 3 times in the last month to make Fajr on time. But you were like, man, he's got to at least be doing it. Like he can't be missing all these. He's got to be doing better than that. End of month 1, you had the argument. and you're going to say to him, you never got up for Fajr on time. And he's like, man, I set my alarm. Like, I was tired. I got up those 3 times. And he's going to think like, I'm doing all this work and she's not recognizing it. You know what? I give up. I'm not doing it anymore because she ain't recognizing it all. And that could be applied to all the different things that he's actually working on. Never say never. If you do have an issue with the progress or the timeline of him making his change, try to approach it from a positive angle, right? Where you say, like, I know you're working. I seen you get up for Fajr those 3 times. I see, I appreciate the flowers you did buy me last week, but I would like some, I would really appreciate if you try a little harder. But I see you try from those types of angles, and at least you're acknowledging that he is making an effort, and he will make more of an effort when you come to him from that angle. And Mubarak mentioned about, like, going to people to identify positives in your husband. You can also use the same strategy to actually get this person to address some of the issues that you have in a marriage, because you can go to other people that he respects to actually talk to them about the issues and get corrections, whether that be his father, brother, your brother, someone like that, without putting all y'all business out on the street, someone that y'all can trust, that's not going to spread your issues, and someone that he's not going to be worried about, like, him knowing, like, them knowing that, like, it could be his mother. You talk to his mother, hey, can you talk to your son about XYZ? You have to be tactful sometimes, but if you can go to someone that he respects that can give them advice on how to improve, right? It's not coming from just you. It's coming from someone that he wants to be like. It's coming from someone that when their words mean something to them. And that's a nice kind of like shortcut to actually get some progress in your marriage.
Yeah, and so that, just to add on to that, you probably should bring that up like when you're getting married. I know we're talking about people who are already married trying to say it, but for those people who are thinking about getting married or getting married again, identifying who those people that your potential spouse or your potential spouse respects and takes advice and making sure you either have the connection or access to those people, it will help in the long run. Now, if it's a red flag, if you ask them, well, whose opinion, who do you know that you take advice or criticism from, or who in your life can criticize you, and you respect their opinion or whatever. If they can't find anybody, listen, good luck, because if you have an issue, and that goes for both sides, sometimes like I remember a person was complaining, and a lady said, my husband is always lecturing me. So I asked, who can lecture you? Nobody. I said, well, if nobody in your life, nobody on the planet can lecture you, then that's a red flag. And these are some things that you really have to, if you ask them on the front end and those people, then you go to that person. If it's the father and you say, hey, listen, this is the issue that I'm having, XYZ. Now, your husband may be, it may annoy him or upset him or whatever. But if his father is that person, and his father sits him down and says, hey, listen, this is the issue. You need to do this, that, and other, and he respects and takes his father's advice and criticism and implements it, then you've won for the most part, if that's something he's going to act on. But if you can't identify those people that your husband will take criticism and construction and nasiha from in a positive way, then you're either just going to have to kind of expect some continued turbulence, or it may be a situation where it can't be saved, if the issues are big. But I would say to just to put a little bow on that from my perspective, and then you can put your finishing touches on it. But I think a lot of the issues, I think women really have a lot of power and control of how well the relationship goes. They really do. I would say more so than the man. The man is pretty much going to be really easy to deal with. And you can save a marriage, a woman, if religiously and socially and all these things are in order. They're okay. a woman can reconnect and attract and attach her husband to her simply by making him feeling respected. It will pretty much neutralize any issues that are there if he feels not fake, but really if he really feels that you respect him. Then it has a way of neutralizing even the issues that you continue to have.
Hmm.
I mean, I could, we don't have enough time today, but there are plenty of issues where people have good marriages, functioning marriages, and some things that their wives do and say um, probably drive them crazy and make them angry and drive them up the wall. But they have a way of making sure that the husbands know that hey, they respect them, and it's not a disrespect thing. It might be a laziness thing, or maybe I knew you was going to let me go, so I know you didn't want me to do it, but you're so nice, and you're always nice to me, so I knew you wouldn't mind, or I knew you were never going to be that mad at me, and so they let them go. But if you establish and make sure that they know that they are respected, then I mean it will melt even the coldest of situations. But it takes work. It's
Hmm.
not easy. It takes work, and it takes consistency.
Yeah, and I will just say to add on to that is there's with men and women, and I was talking about this topic in another marital type situation. It was relating to intimacy actually, but it's about you have to, if you want a certain behavior out of a interpersonal relationship with your spouse, right? You need or want or like a certain behavior. You actually have to reward that behavior, right? And we can get into like love language. I know what that's like Mubarak's like taboo word, but this is like what it is. So like you have to find a way to reward that behavior. They have to let that person know, like consciously or subconsciously, like it's good when I do this, right? And when we're talking, like Mubarak's talking about respect, one of the number one love languages that for men that we understand is like, oh, this she respects me, she honors me, or she gives me peace. Whatever those things are that that your husband values, then when there's an issue at hand that you have a problem with, and you see that your husband does the right thing and whatever it is, just don't be like, oh yeah, he finally took out the trash. No, you have to. It's like a dog. You have to reward that behavior, reward that action, so that you're actually training your spouse to be the best spouse for you, right? And same thing for husbands. You have to train your spouse to be the best spouse for you. And it could be a whole nother show, but I was talking about this in relation to intimacy, right? With husbands and wives. You can't just expect to go and be intimate with your partner and they just gonna knock your socks off day one. And then, like, if you have that, you hit the jackpot, right? You got the lottery. But in most cases, you have to work and train the behavior in all aspects to like, no, this is how we function in this area. This is how we function as husband and wife. And when you run into issues, the first step isn't to just go and complain about it. Oh, I want a divorce. I'm out of here. All that. You can reward, and as we're talking about for women to men, you can a man will pick up very quickly. Like, hey, every time I bring flowers home, like I like she treats me like I'm a king for a week. We'll recognize that, and guess what? You're gonna be probably getting flowers like every other day. Like, yeah, here you go. You're gonna get sick of flowers, right? But if you get the flowers, you put them in the call, thank you, and then you go like, what took you so long to get here? I ain't getting no flowers no more. What the hell's I wasted $20 on flowers? They gonna die anyway. I ain't getting their flowers no more. you know.
Exactly, exactly.
So
So yeah, so this is general. It's general information. It's not like very specific. I'm sure there's, and I don't know if you have any questions or anything, but I'm sure there's some things where in real life, actual scenarios where there's some things. Well, you said this, but this, yeah, there are some adjustments and some audibles that you may have to run to make these work. But in general, these are the things that if you implement them and you want to save your marriage, I think for sure that even if you just implement it just across the board with any type of person, I think that you'll be successful in saving it. If it is worth saving, then you can definitely do it. Now If you just do some of the stuff or not all of it, then that's like take following a recipe, but only using half of the the order, or only going halfway down the list. Sometimes it takes both sides. It takes implementing it all the way, and not just the things that you want, and not for
Mhm.
the other side, but in general, if you put these things into practice, and Allah knows best, but you should be successful in saving your marriage that you want to save, inshallah.
Yeah. So we didn't have any questions, but I have one question from a couple weeks ago that when you got disconnected at the end, I gave like a
Mhm.
little answer to it, but I'd like to hear your answer, your perspective to this question. So let me pull it up. It's from a female, and she says, I was talking to a man for months and we intended on getting married. However, he always wanted to wait because he was not ready. A few weeks ago, he told me he just got married, but still wants to get married to me in the future as his second wife. What should I do?
So clearly, what the issue was, this is see, that's why you have to have a man. This is one of the situations and I don't know. Maybe she does have a father and brothers that are active in her life. If that's the case, then they probably should have been talking to him.
Yep.
And if they were, then they probably would have told you what I'm about to tell you now, which is, if he was talking to you, he was talking also to someone else, or maybe a few other people that he felt like were better candidates and better fits for him. So
Hmm.
while he's trying to close the deal or trying to get married to these other people, he's keeping you on the hook just in case. So you were the backup plan, So you were a backup plan for getting married, but now that he's gotten married, he's like, well, I mean, she was a pretty good, candidate as well. So let me see if I can also marry her. That's what
Yep.
it looks like what happened. So uh, it's you could possibly have wasted your time, but if he's a really good brother, maybe you should still marry him. I doubt it, because I don't hear that he was talking to your father or brother or anything like that for all this time.
Yep.
Seems like he was keeping you on a string. So have your wali assess whether he's a good candidate and a good fit for you. Um, if he is, then you should consider still marrying him. If he's not, then well, that's the issue. If you don't have a wali, if you don't have anyone to do this for you, like we said a few shows back, that this is what we're willing to do for anybody who is not or does not have access to uh, wali, or people who can properly sniff out these situations for them and protect them from spending months or however long getting strung along, uh, when we would have known immediately.
Yep.
This person has you on the sideline. You're on the bench. Maybe he might call you up to the big leagues, but for the most part, you're not going to get in front of whoever else he's considering that's better for him than you. So if a person needs any woman who does not have your revert or whatever it is, you don't have any strong male representation, we have volunteered to do it. There's
Yep.
no charge. It's just a public service, because it's a disaster with a lot of these ladies they just don't like this situation. They're they're in disasters quite often, and we hope that if we can at least prevent one person from being in such disaster, then we will have done our job, and we hope that
Yep.
Allah accepts it from us.
I mean, great answer. All right, that's it for our show this week. Thank you for tuning in. For those of you who are watching this stuff or watching the clips afterwards, go ahead and enter your questions or comments. We appreciate all the engagement, and we try to answer as much as possible and engage with you guys. If there's any specific show topics that you want us to cover, feel free to put them in the comments. And again, you can email us at emailamansworld@gmail.com. If you need help with, you need you need a Wali services, contact us. We're more than welcome to do it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
All right, all set.